Okay, now for the start of our series of interviews with veterans of the USS Nimitz, starting with PJ Hughes. I started the interview by asking him his thoughts about Mike Turber's claim that the Tic Tac UFOs are in fact U.S. technology.
I'm like 60-40 with it being our technology. I'm open to whatever it turns out to be. So
60 being?
It's ours.
Okay.
Like I've said in other interviews, I know stuff that I dealt with in the military, that programs that I was read into that the average person doesn't know. So if there's stuff I know that you don't know, I guarantee you there's stuff that other people know that I don't know. It's just the way it works. But interesting, you said he mentioned a briefing. The Freedom of Information Act, a request was just returned the other day that stated there was a classified briefing that they have found, which kind of fortunately or unfortunately lines up with his story a little.
We should talk about that because that was just released, and we had seen that report, and now it seems to have gone mainstream with the FOIA response of the U.S. Navy, which talks about a briefing, and there being briefing slides that they have not released. Correct. And at least one video they have not released.
I'm pretty sure the video is the video we've seen, just the full version that Chad Underwood has stated exists, and he's the one who recorded it, so we know it exists. Jason Turner, he's seen the full video, so we know there's a longer video, and that's probably what they're talking about. Obviously, they may be talking about something else, but as far as what we know and what technology we know we had at the time, the only thing that was really recording was the gun cameras on the F-18s. There's nothing else that really had the capabilities to record at the time.
Mm-hmm. So, and that is the video that you believe we've seen?
Yes.
And that's from the third. That's from the third F-18 that was sent out, right?
Depends which way you look at it, but yes.
And the 10-minute video, is that your understanding that Underwood, et cetera, say that the video is approximately 10 minutes long?
Give or take. He didn't really specify the time. He just said it's much longer than the one that was released.
And higher quality.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the video that's been released was emailed, cut down. So it's a horrible quality just from how many times it's been transmitted.
Have you seen video from F-18 fighters before?
Yes.
And does it usually look like that or no?
It looks as clear as I'm looking at you right now.
Oh, is it always black and white?
Yes, the FLIRs are black and white.
But it would be far clearer. And what level of detail do you think we'd be seeing on that Tic Tac if we were able to see that video?
I think you'd probably see everything we've said that exists on it. The L-shaped antenna or appendage coming out of the bottom, you probably would have seen.
Remind me, who was the original person to report the L-shaped antenna?
I honestly thought it was Fravor, but I'm not 100% sure at this point. Because I know Jason Turner said the appendages were there. An unnamed individual on the Hawkeye said they were there. So multiple people from multiple avenues have said those appendages were there.
Now, by the way, the video from the East Coast, which they refer to as Gimbal, or what's the other?
Go Fast.
And Go Fast. Those are also poor quality.
Yep.
So what's going on there?
If you've ever looked at any footage, whether it's like a bomb site footage or any of the footage that generally released to the media, it's always a lower quality than what it actually is.
So sometimes that's just done intentionally?
That's my assumption. I'm sure there's somebody else who deals with that stuff on a daily basis who may say otherwise. But there's a lot of technology that deals with all that stuff that if we release the full true version of stuff, people will know how good our stuff actually is. I don't think they want to share that.
So you were associated with the Hawkeye,
correct?
Right? And am I correct that you sometimes flew on the Hawkeye?
No. I mean, I have flown on it, but not routinely.
Okay.
I speak for one of the crew members who routinely flew. him and I are extremely good friends. So I know a lot of what he knows, some of which he shouldn't have shared with me, so I can't share with anybody else. Some which he shared with both Dave Beatty and myself. So there's a lot of stuff that happened with the Hawkeye that people aren't taking into account.
So to be clear about this friend of yours that I think in a prior interview I saw you refer to him as Roger.
Yep.
So let's refer to him, continue to refer to him as Roger. You're saying there's some things that he's reported to you and Dave Beatty, who produced a documentary, that still has not been disclosed?
Correct. The Hawkeye crew, and this is one of the things I've been trying to push it out on my Twitter because I apparently am popular on Twitter, and I'm not sure why. There's a lot of stuff that happened with the Hawkeye that hasn't been taken into account, whether it's in the official, unofficial report or any of the reporting that's happened. When that plane came back, the crew kind of stayed in the airplane, and we called it a hot pump or hot switch. We'd leave the engines on so they could refuel and go out again, except they weren't supposed to go out again. Basically, they just sat there for a while with the engines on. When the engine shut off, the crew hightailed it out of there, went down to what they call SCIF. It's a centralized information facility. Basically, it's a room you can't hear outside of. And they were debriefed, signed non-disclosure agreements, and then...
Now, hold on a second. Let's just be clear as far as exactly where you were at this time. Did you actually see the thing land?
Yes, I caught the airplane. We always have maintainers there to recover the airplanes when they came back. I launched that airplane, and I recovered it.
Which for non-military types like me, launching it and recovering it means what?
We have to. There's a lot of stuff in that airplane that has to be turned on. Takes a while to get the airplane up to full capability, so to speak. So we're up there almost 3 hours before the plane leaves the deck to get everything running and checked out. So you're part of the crew to get it prepared for flying. Yep.
And then when it landed, you were part of the crew that was supposed to meet the plane.
Yes, sir.
To do, I forget the term. What was the term you used?
Basically, we recovered it.
Recovering it.
But we go in, we check to make sure nothing fell off, nothing broke. We usually talk to the air crew so we have a head start if something did break, but I didn't get to talk to them that time.
And by the way, to be clear, when it launched, it wasn't launching to go check out the Tic Tac.
No, we were launching a part of air defense exercises, just general workups, training.
So at what point did you first become aware of the Tic Tac at all?
After the plane landed, I took our classified hard drives that we use in the back that were recording a bunch of stuff, which we can get into later if you want. We took them down and we keep them in our safe inside our work center. And I don't know, maybe 10 minutes after I got them in our safe, my commanding officer and two guys in Air Force flight suits show up at my door. And generally, if our commanding officer wants to talk to us, we go to him. He doesn't come to us. So it was already abnormal that he was at our door, let alone showing up with two Air Force guys. And he basically took those hard drives, and I've never seen him again.
Were you by yourself at the time you took them?
No, there were other people with me.
Have those people spoken out?
To me, yes. To the public, no. Because most of them are still either active duty or in a position where they don't want to risk their security clearances.
So bottom line, they could corroborate your story at some point.
There are people that could corroborate my story, yes.
And at the time that they knocked on your door, you still had not heard that the Hawkeye had intercepted some Tic Tac, correct?
Correct.
But you did. But sorry, didn't you say that you did notice something unusual when it landed?
The fact that he came down to our work center to take stuff was abnormal.
But what about the sorry, I thought you had also in one of the interviews said that the landing, that the pilots or the people that had been on the plane were acting a little unusual when they got off the plane.
About to get there.
Okay, sorry.
They had gone down and they were debriefed. I'm not exactly sure how long they were in their debrief and what exactly they discussed or were debriefed on. But when Roger returned to our work center, because Roger was enlisted like I was, and he wasn't an officer, He briefly started to tell us what happened until he was told to be quiet.
Who told him to be quiet?
Our division chief. Another person who really had no idea what was going on, but heard him saying something, saying, "I'm not really sure if I'm supposed to be talking about this." So it was one of those, well, if you don't think you're supposed to be talking about it, shut up. It was one of those kind of conversations. Nothing crazy.
And what did Roger say in that conversation?
He started talking about the object and stuff that we've now all found out. But like I said, that was really the end of it at that point. I know the ship made jokes. The airplane had a cartoon about it. They played movies about aliens and all kinds of stuff. The ship was making a big joke of it.
So you heard about that?
Yeah.
So, and when you say the ship was kind of making a joke about it, you got approximately 5,000 people on that thing, right?
And I'd
this
say
is an aircraft carrier.
4,000 probably had no clue what was going on.
Say that again?
A good 4,000 of them probably had no idea what was going on.
Okay. But as far as this playing an alien movie and jokes and hats and this kind of stuff, I'm just trying to get a flavor for how extensive that was.
It was mostly among the air wing and the air wing officers, because they were the ones who knew. They were the ones who, the air wing did the airplane, they did the cartoon, they did all that. So it was mainly the officers poking fun at the other officers.
And to the best of your recollection, what exactly did Roger say in that conversation about what he had seen, experienced?
It was a very, very brief. He started to tell us that they saw something, and that was as far as they got. I now know the full extent of what he saw. The Tic Tac, the object itself, formed up with the Hawkeye, and they could see it outside the windows.
And you know that based on subsequent discussions with Roger?
Yes.
And I think you also said that Roger was kind of acting unusual after the incident, like he was
Roger,
like kind of rattled.
He loved to fly, so any chance he got to go up and fly, he was all about it. So when he came back and wasn't all happy and go lucky and jokey, you could tell something wasn't right. Just the way he acted.
And did he later kind of confirm to you that, yeah, dude, this was really weird and I was rattled?
They were more rattled by the fact that it showed up right next to him. The Hawkeye has no weapons. It has no way to defend itself. So if something pops up next to it, there's nothing they can do. And
it usually flies above the Hornets?
It's usually way up. And the Hornets, it's essentially a quarterback. It controls everything else. So we're normally, 250 miles or so from the carrier, depending on what we're doing. And the fighters are out beyond that. So.
And what altitude is it usually at?
It depends. It depends on what they're doing. Depends on the weather. Depends on atmospherics. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into where that plane is.
And what kind of recording equipment, audio and video, is on the Hawkeye?
This is open for debate to some people because some people say I'm nuts. But the Hawkeye can record basically everything it does. Everything the 3 flight officers in the back see on their screens, it can record from the time we start it to the time we stop it.
And was it recording that day?
Oh, yeah. I'm the one who started it.
And when you say what they're seeing, that is seeing through what kind of cameras?
No cameras. It's recording symbology, data, things like that.
And what about radar? They don't even see things on radar?
Oh, yeah. It's recording the radar data. Every unknown track, every known track, every hostile track that pops up on that screen gets recorded. And it's the same for every sensor system on that airplane.
And was the Tic Tac seen on radar by the Hawkeye?
Yes. It was.
And what would that look like if we were to see the video of that?
A little circle with a line coming from it. The longer the line, the faster it's going. And it would be, in this case, like a yellowish orange color because it's an unknown track. Red means bad, blue means good.
So that would be yet another video that theoretically is out there.
It's not a video in the sense it's a video. It's not like a TV video. It's literally a recording of their screen.
Mm-hmm.
All the
But
data.
there's a time element to it, right?
Yes.
Or am I wrong? Yeah. So
Nope.
you'd be looking at their radar as their radar appeared during the time they were flying, observing the Tic Tac.
Yes. And there's timestamps. You could identify the time it popped up, where it went. There's also, I can't tell you everything that was on there, but there was also a system called ESM, which is electronic support measures. It's basically a passive detection system. It listens to electronic signals, so it can tell frequencies and all kinds of other things. So it was also picked up by that. So there's a ton of data that gives them that is out there somewhere.
So, to the best of your recollection, what did Roger say to you about what he observed when you had the subsequent conversation with him?
Basically, after it toyed with Fravor, after his whole little deal, they were headed back to the ship. It's outside the window, then it's gone. It was all that quick.
So I think you cut out there just a brief second. So basically, the two Hornets are heading back to the ship.
Yep. And even the Hawkeye was basically everything was headed back to recover.
And out of nowhere, a Tic Tac. Because by the way, there's been a lot. There's only one Tic Tac in the video. Yes. A lot of people are talking about just a Tic Tac, even though, correct me if I'm wrong, the phased array Spy 1 radar system was picking up 5 to 10 Tic Tacs at a time.
Yes. So we don't really know. They were tracking the Tic Tacs for well over a week.
Right.
It could have been the same 4 or 5. It could have been different ones every day. We don't really know.
Right. But as far as what these guys encountered, both the Hawkeye and the Hornets, it was just only one that any of them saw.
As far as I could tell, yes. I would assume it was the same one.
So Roger says essentially out of nowhere, the Tic Tac suddenly appears very close to their plane.
Correct. Close enough for them to see the appendages. Close enough for them to recognize that it was the same thing Fravor was talking about.
Close enough to see an American flag on the side of it?
My guess is they wouldn't have painted the American flag on the side of
it. So how does he describe what he saw?
Exactly like Fravor, a giant fighter-sized looking Tic Tac.
You said fighter size?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
40 or so feet long. Like I said, pretty close to every other description that's been given.
And how close does he think they were to it?
Closer than a mile. He didn't really get too specific with that.
Mm-hmm.
Close enough that it freaked him out.
And how long was it in that position?
Minute and a half, maybe.
Wow, that's a long
Not
time.
very long.
Well, I mean, when you're looking at something like that you've never seen before in your life, and you're freaking out, a minute to minute and a half probably feels like a lifetime.
That'd be my guess.
And he says that all 5 people on board the Hawkeye saw it.
The 3 in the back, we know for sure saw it because I've talked to more than one of them. And we assume the 2 in front saw it. We just haven't talked to them to verify.
So you've spoken to at least 2 of the 5 people that were on board who said that they saw it.
Yes, I know who all 5 people in that plane were.
Mm-hmm. And you believe that if you were to speak to all 5 of them, each one of the 5 would say, "Yeah, we saw it."
That's my assumption.
Mm-hmm. So they were debriefed. Did Roger tell you who debriefed him?
No.
Is it your belief that it was probably the same Air Force guys?
I couldn't even speculate. It could have been the ship's intel. It could have been a whole bunch of different people. We were close enough to San Diego that, it was a 40-minute helicopter ride from San Diego.
So what does Roger say he thinks it was?
He hasn't said anything along that line. He hasn't speculated. He hasn't guessed. He's corroborated what he saw. and that's about as far as he wants to go with it.
Mm-hmm. But he still remains a good friend of yours today.
Yep.
And in general, is he someone who tends to believe in extraterrestrial UFOs?
Yeah. I don't know, to be honest with you, we've never really had that conversation. Despite all this, we've never really sat down and talked about that.
Yeah. Well, because, the angle I've been taking is that it certainly appears that something was seen. The Navy itself at the highest level seems to be confirming that.
Yes.
So something incredible happened on that day. Either the U.S. Navy observed extraterrestrial spacecraft, or it observed incredible new secret U.S. technology.
I have somewhat of a theory on that, which is why I tend to lean towards it's our tech versus alien. Again, I'm equally open to it being something from out of this world. I'm not against that. But if there's between the 2004 incident with the Nimitz and the Princeton and everything that happened off the East Coast in 2015, there's two similarities between those two strike groups. In 2004, the Nimitz strike group was the best the Navy had. Aircraft, training, software, technology, it was the top of the line. 2015, that strike group that was involved, same thing. Newest technology, newest software, newest aircraft, best the Navy had at the time. So if I'm some other secret government agency and I want to test my object, I'm going to test it against the best we have, and that's what happened with the two different situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been talking about that, and that's essentially what Turber asserts, that it was that type of a test, but we've had others come on and say that it would be highly unusual for one department of the military to test something against another one.
To my knowledge, yes.
But unusual things happen.
Yeah.
And also the theory would be that at the highest levels, it was known what was going on. It's just the guys at your level and even at Fravor's level were not in on it. But at the commanding level, they were in on it.
It all depends on how accurate you want your test to be. But the more people who know it's a test, the less accurate your results are going to be.
Right.
So they could have stopped that knowledge at Commander Pacific Fleet, or they could have stopped it at the Strike Group Admiral. There's a handful of different places they could have stopped that knowledge at if people in fact knew.
Well, and a point that Turber made on our show is that, of course, they were in on it at the highest level because you would not send Navy Hornets out to check out unidentified objects flying as they were without ordnance. I mean, you're sending them on an arguably dangerous mission to just go check out something that we have no idea what it is. It's exhibiting supersonic speeds, and you're going to go just check it out without any weapons?
Yes. We do that all the time.
Like, give me an example.
Any unknown track that the Hawkeye picks up, they generally vector a fighter to go check it out. Be like, what is this? And that's the fighter's job. And they go, oh, just a pleasure boat. It's just a Cessna. It's it's flying here. It's an airliner. It's
and is that because our technology, those Hornets, are just so damn fast and pilots so good that worst case scenario, you get in a situation, it can get out of it. It doesn't necessarily need weapons.
For one, we also had weapons on the ship. They could have had other aircraft airborne relatively quickly with weapons. It has a lot to do with where we were operating, what we were doing, and what they initially thought it was. Fravors mentioned, it could have been drug runners. Well, nothing the drug runners are going to have is going to really bother that F-18. It's either going to outrun it or scare the crap out of it. I don't know if you've ever had an F-18 fly close to you overhead. It makes a whole lot of noise. It'll do a lot of scaring just with the noise of its engines.
What do you make of the question that was asked of the pilots? And you're going to correct me if I get this wrong, where they basically asked the pilots, do you have, confirming whether or not they have ordnance on them?
They didn't, more than likely. They may have had bullets, because they a lot of times bullets.
But you know what I'm talking about, the question, this was picked up
They have
in the recordings.
Training missiles. It's basically blue missiles stuck to the side of the airplane, and they play laser tag, so they can pretend to shoot each other. There was no live ordnance that we know about. That
do these, just out of curiosity, do these training missiles actually fire, or they're just sitting there?
There's no way they're coming off the rail.
Mm-hmm.
They're stuck.
So specifically, though, I'm talking about the recording where the question is asked, because we've had guests on who said that's a very unusual question to even ask, because of course they don't have ordnance on them. They're in training. So why would you even ask that question?
Ordnance is carried in training, whether they're doing target practice, bombing practice. It's not completely unusual for there to be ordnance involved. The reason it's abnormal is the Princeton gets the same air plan everybody else does. The Princeton would have known if it had ordnance or not, because what planes leave with what ordnance is planned out ahead of time, so they can have the ordnance where it needs to be.
And you never have them in training?
Not generally.
So who was it that asked that question?
Kevin Day.
Kevin was the one that asked the pilots, do you have ordnance?
It was either him or what's her name? Teresa Elders, I believe, who's no longer with us.
Mm. Who was she?
She was, I forget what her title was. But basically she was an officer right above Kevin.
Mm. Yeah, in the documentary.
That's what it is.
Pardon
me? She was a tactical action officer, the TAO.
Okay. In the Dave Beatty video, which is called what, the Nimitz Encounters?
Yes, sir.
He does some recreations on there.
Yes.
And it's a female's voice who asked the question, so maybe it was her.
That was Dave Beatty's wife.
Ah, okay. No, she's an actress.
Close enough.
But anyway, that probably tells us that it was the woman who asked that.
It was more than likely, yes. And either Dave or Kevin can correct me on that.
But anyway, that question doesn't really strike you as that odd.
Yes and no. It happens. Because not always, even though the information was on the Princeton, they may not have had it right where they were. And it's easier sometimes just to directly ask the question than go find the answer.
We can only. I'm sorry. We can only speculate as to why she asked that, but perhaps, correct. I mean, if you listen to Kevin Day and what he was observing something pretty spectacular, and which means that she was privy to that also. So maybe they were concerned that they were sending him into some dangerous situation.
Kevin has stated more than once his main concern for getting somebody to go check those out was because they were ultimately posing a hazard to safety of navigation for the aircraft. They were in our airspace. They were in places where it could ultimately cause a collision with an aircraft or danger to the pilots that were out there. Mm-hmm. That was one of his big pushes to convince the Princeton skipper to allow them to take control of the fighters and vector them over to one of the tracks they saw.
Mm-hmm. And I assume this is the only time that Kevin has ever experienced seeing these types of things on the radar system, or are there other times that he's seen them?
Other than that week, to my knowledge, he hadn't seen them before that.
And am I right that it was, I know you said that it was the best the Navy had, the Nimitz at the time. How new was that radar system at the time? Do you know?
It wasn't necessarily the fact that the radar system was new. It was the software they were using.
Mm-hmm. So the question is, if it was a test, were they testing the software or were they testing the Tic Tacs?
Good question. Don't really have that answer.
Mm-hmm. And then same goes with the East Coast thing. So there was two different incidents on the East Coast, right? The one you were talking about before where you said it was the latest and greatest technology was which one? Was that GoFest or Gimbal?
Both of them.
Both of them. Both of them was the same strike group.
The way I understood it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gotten quite as deep into those.
Mm-hmm. And have you communicated with those guys at all?
No.
So let's go back to when you're first approached. You're putting the bricks away, and there's a knock on the door, and there's a couple Air Force guys and your commanding officer.
Yes, sir.
I mean, just incredibly unusual to have A, Air Force guys suddenly appear, B, have your commanding officer come to you, and C, have your what otherwise is a routine job of putting the stuff away interrupted.
Yep. I mean, the stuff was actually in my safe at that point. When I had to open the safe, it's a 2-person safe, so 2 different combinations. The other half of the combination actually was on its way back from getting a snack. So they actually had to wait a minute for us to be able to open the safe again. And normally when
why do you put the stuff in a safe?
It's classified.
So even on a simple training mission like that, all that data is considered classified.
Yes. Even if we hadn't recorded anything, all that's still classified because those hard drives contain the software for the systems and a whole bunch of tactical information. So they were classified secret no matter what.
And in the rest of your career, did you ever have bricks taken from you?
Not in that manner.
So they knock on the door. They say, open the safe and give them to us.
Basically, when he opened the door, we opened the door, he said, I need the bricks that were on that flight. You know, we have a logbook that tracks what bricks were on what plane. So we knew which ones they were. And it's not unheard of for them to come take the brick. Sometimes they need to update information on it. Sometimes they need to update like waypoints or other files. So they periodically come to get them before. Normally we just sign in our logbook, so-and-so has them. They take them to the ready room and they bring them back when they're done. In this case, when I was starting to sign them out, he stopped me. It's like, don't worry about it. I'm taking them. That's it. End of discussion. So.
And then how much time elapsed before you had the conversation with Roger where he
really
10 minutes?
Give or take a minute. I mean, that was 14 years ago or so now.
Right. So. But that's the conversation that got interrupted. And then later he gave you more detail.
Yes.
How much later was it when he gave the more detail?
Don't remember at this point. Same day.
Same day. I think you said in one of the interviews that this whole incident, you had almost kind of semi-forgotten it until something else came up.
Forgot? Yes. You know, it ends up being a drinking story, something you mention a few times when you get a little too drunk. But for the most part, it was something I remembered, but it wasn't something I talked about. It wasn't something I researched, looked into. Then I ran across Dave Beatty's original version of the Nimitz encounters, his documentary. And I reached out basically saying, hey, there's a bunch more to this story you don't know. And, you know, Dave did his due diligence to make sure I wasn't full of it and just, you know, trying to latch onto something. You know, he verified who I was. He verified my DD-214. Ultimately, he got put in contact with Roger. Rogers gave a very brief, it was a very brief email basically to clarify with Dave Beatty that I wasn't full of shit. He corroborated what he could with Dave Beatty. And that's how I got involved. And through that's when I got in touch with Gary, Kevin, Jason, and the whole group. And it was interesting because Dave Beatty knew all our stories before we kind of knew all our stories. You know, at that point, he had already been involved with Gary and Kevin for a while.
And to be clear, these are guys that all worked on the Princeton right?
Yes. I'm the only one who's come forward from the Nimitz.
Mm-hmm.
So, at the moment, at least. Hopefully, there'll be more.
So, the incident had happened. It had been a long time. It had been about 10 years since it happened, or over 10 years. And when you saw the Nimitz documentary, it triggered everything.
Yep.
But did you need to be re-triggered about the fact that the Air Force guys had taken the thing?
That was the part I filled in Dave Beatty right away. And that's what I told him in my initial email to him, was that they had come and taken it. And through talking and reading everybody else's experience, you almost begin to second guess yourself. Like, maybe that's not entirely what I remembered. And then you talk to Gary Voorhees, who had guys show up and take his stuff. And then you reach out to people who were there, and they all remember the same exact thing you do. So now I'm 100% positive that they showed up and took my stuff. Any doubt I had when I first reached out to Dave Beatty has been shoved out the window.
And the doubt was simply a matter of it being a long time ago.
Yep.
Because, again, it seems like a highly unusual thing that you wouldn't forget.
Yeah. Like I said, I remember the details, and the few things that, I've forgotten over time, when I've reconnected with the guys who were there with me, and I've talked at length with several of the other guys I worked with, several of the guys higher in my command, and then obviously I've talked at length with Roger about it. People have reminded me of stuff I've forgotten. I've obviously reminded them of stuff they've forgotten, but I've been able to rebuild my memory of the events through talking with the other people that were there. Because, like you said, it's a long time ago. I didn't remember every single detail.
So who else interacted with these two Air Force guys?
There were 3 other guys in the work center with me at the time.
Oh, sorry. You're saying when they knocked on the door?
There were 3 other guys with me.
Okay. But none of them have spoken out yet?
Correct.
And what about of people who have spoken out? Is there anyone else who's spoken out and said that, yes, 2 Air Force guys came and took whatever?
The closest to anybody going public is Roger, who's obviously not gone public in, he hasn't really gone public. He's just shared stuff through myself and Dave Beatty. But Gary Voorhees has corroborated that people took his stuff, but he doesn't remember them being in Air Force flight suits. He just remembers them being in plain clothes.
So Voorhees says that in another unusual move, he had to hand over stuff.
He had to hand over stuff, and he had to erase a bunch of stuff.
And that would have been highly unusual.
Yep.
And who does he recall? He says it wasn't Air Force. So who was it that he says?
He doesn't know. He just 2 guys.
Mm-hmm. So really, you're the only one that's come out at this point about the 2 Air Force guys.
Correct.
But have you spoken to any of the other 3 guys that were with you recently to kind of confirm, hey, by the way, guys, you have the same recollection I do?
About 2 months ago was the last time.
And they said?
That they were definitely Air Force guys. I've been trying to pressure them to come forward. One of them is thinking about it, but isn't 100% sure he wants to risk what he does right now. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's welcome on the Hidden Truth Show anytime. As you know, we pay $5 per appearance, so let him know.
I will do.
Because, that part is a really, in my opinion, really critical part, because if the Air Force is involved in this, it does tend to push you toward the 60%, as you say, of this being some type of U.S. test. Correct. Because if it was extraterrestrial, let's hypothesize, why is the Air Force suddenly there?
But the other part to that is the Princeton had been tracking the object for about a week or so. That's more than enough time for word to make it back to San Diego and to whatever other agencies need to know, and people mobilized and then come out to the ship.
Yeah.
Now that's more than enough time for them to be like, hey, it's a UFO. Hey, we're the guys who research UFOs, so let's go get it.
Yeah.
There's more than enough time for all that kind of stuff to happen.
Right. But presumably, if they're taking it, they're trying to control information, right?
Yes.
And so either the U.S. government is trying to control information about its own secret project, or is trying to control information regarding an extraterrestrial object. I know people in the UFO community believe that the U.S. government does a lot of things to hide extraterrestrial objects from us, but that's mostly a theory.
A lot of it has to do. The government hides stuff. I know that for a fact. It's not. I don't know, and I could be 100% wrong. I'm just going from my knowledge and my experience. There's stuff that the government has that we don't want everybody else to know about. There is technology in use on the Hawkeye that I can't talk about. 2 enlisted people in my squadron at the time were cleared on it. One was me, one was Roger. Everybody else had no clue what those boxes were, except for the 2 of us and the officers. There's stuff that the Hawkeye would have recorded that would have been very valuable, whether it was our tech or somebody else's tech. When you add that data to the radar tracks, to the ESM tracks, to what would have been shared over the CC network, there is a ton of data, raw data, whether it's frequencies or trying to figure out a way to say it without saying anything I can't say. But there would have been frequencies, altitudes, directions, all kinds of data that was pulled.
Mm-hmm. In other words, the mere fact that we have that data tells you there's something unique on this Hawkeye.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's unique stuff on.
Let's talk a little bit about the NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, that you say that Roger and the other 4 people that were on the Hawkeye had to sign.
Now I'm going to be clear. I've never seen the NDAs. No one else has signed NDAs. I have no reason to doubt that Roger and the crew did sign them. And my assumption, my reasoning for them most likely signing them has to do with the fact that the thing showed up right next to them and all the information they would have seen about that object. They would have seen a whole lot of data about it on their screens.
So how many people told you they signed an NDA?
Roger is the only person I've been to be able to verify that has said they were signing NDAs.
Is the whole concept of signing an NDA as a result of an incident something that's common in the Navy?
Yes. I couldn't tell you how many NDAs I've signed.
Huh. See, that's first I've heard of that, not being a military guy, because it would just seem to me that the mere fact that you're in the military and you know certain things are top secret, and it's just, isn't there some understanding, generally speaking, about what things you're allowed to talk about and what you can't talk about?
100%. But if you look at the types of security clearances, you have no clearance, you have confidential, you have secret, you have top secret. And that's ultimately the extent of security clearances. Within those levels, there's all kinds of other different acronyms. So, I can have a top secret clearance. You could have a top secret clearance, and we know nothing about each other's stuff. I'm not allowed to know about your top secret stuff, and you're not allowed to know about my top secret stuff. It's all compartmentalized. Mm-hmm. And, I've signed NDAs for accidental exposure to things.
So even after, usually an NDA is signed before you get the information.
Correct.
But you've gotten them both before and after you've gotten the information.
Yep.
And give us the essence of what the NDA says. I'm sure it's a bunch of legalese, but what's kind of the essence of it?
Ironically, I've never read the whole thing. But basically,
nobody does.
It lists whatever I'm not supposed to say or what I'm not supposed to talk about, whether it's a system or a topic or an event. And then it tells me I'm going to jail for a very long time if I open my mouth.
Wow. So it really does talk about jail.
Yes. I mean, I'm sure you can Google search standard military NDA. They're out there. They're not exactly a hidden secret.
So I'd like to also ask you about what Fravor says, Dave Fravor, the squadron commander, who essentially says that he was not interrogated about it, not debriefed, nothing was taken from him, etc., and almost seems to kind of cast doubt on your story and the story of some of the other guys.
Yep. I'm going to start out by saying I 100% believe everything Fravor has said about what he's seen, what he experienced. The guy is highly trained. He was not in his position by luck. He did everything he could to earn it to be there. I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. I gotta let my dog out. He's being annoying.
Go ahead.
Logan, Fravor said he was, top 20 as far as seniority in the hierarchy of the carrier. I mean, he's not wrong. He was up there. But just because he's that high doesn't mean he has a need to know everything. There's stuff that happened in the Hawkeye squadron that he has no need to know. I'm sure there's stuff that happened in his squadron that the Hawkeye skipper had no need to know. Again, it's compartmentalized information. I guarantee you he had no clue about certain things that were on that Hawkeye because it had nothing to do with his job. It had nothing to do with his aircraft. He wouldn't be read into that program. And if that system is why I suspect the NDAs were signed, he's going to know nothing about it. And the guys who signed them aren't going to go advertise to him, oh, yeah, we signed NDAs.
Mm-hmm. Well, and furthermore, because he's higher up, maybe there was less need to have him sign an NDA.
I mean, ultimately, Fravor is, granted, the most public person with this whole story. But he's also the smallest part of the entire story. He was sent to look at something by the Princeton. He looked at it, he saw it, he chased it, he went away. And that's the extent of his time in the whole event. Mm-hmm. He got back to the ship. He told the next crew going out, who was Underwood, and whoever was with Underwood, hey, we just saw this. If you see it, see if you can get some footage of it. I don't know exactly what words he used, but Underwood takes off, happens to run into it, gets that FLIR footage, and that's where we are. But
remind me, has Underwood spoken out?
Yep. Couple weeks ago, maybe a little more than a month ago. There's an article, an interview with him.
And he corroborated Fravor, essentially, that he did see something?
Yep.
So that's...
And he corroborated a good portion of what we said, too. Because one of the things Fravor says was the video was out there was all there was. And Underwood has already stated, no, there's more.
And what about the guys that say they actually saw it with binoculars from the Princeton?
I wholeheartedly believe it.
But it was very far away, though, right?
Very, very big binoculars. They were called big eyes. They're meant for doing that.
And, of course, the altitude of the Tic Tac would have had to have been a certain level for them to see it because of the horizon. Yep. If it was low, they wouldn't have seen it.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, they were tracking them for a whole week, and Kevin would have to clarify because I don't know what altitudes or what exactly locations, but they were tracked at a variety of different altitudes, a variety of different places. And like I said, more than one person, some of whom really have no contact with each other, have said they saw it with their own eye.
So the same type of bricks that were on the Hawkeye would have been on the Hornets, correct?
No.
Is there a brick at all on a Hornet?
They have mission tapes.
Okay. So let's talk about the mission tapes. Wouldn't the Air Force theoretically want those mission tapes just like they wanted the stuff off the Hawkeye?
Nope. There's nothing there.
Explain.
The radar on a Hornet is not meant for doing the same things the Princeton's radar was. It was not meant for doing the same thing the Hawkeye radar was. It was meant for a dogfight or, that type of thing. It's a fire control radar. It's meant to aim the missile. It's not meant to it's got a very short range. It's got not meant to do everything. That's the extent of its real capabilities. It's got that and the FLIR pod. Beyond that, it's guns and missiles.
But did they or did they not pick up the Tic Tacs on their radar?
Don't know. I've heard both.
So if they did pick it up, then there would be essentially a pseudo video of that.
Yep. They would have painted a track just like the Princeton would have, just like we would have. But it would have been shared to both the Princeton and the Hawkeye via data links. So that data was already in two other places.
Whatever the Hornets are picking up, the Hawkeye's getting from the Hornets.
Yep.
So for sure, the Hornet bricks would be the key bricks to get.
The Hawkeye bricks.
Yes, the Hawkeye bricks.
I would have seen everything the Princeton saw. The Hawkeye would have seen everything the fighters saw. The Hawkeye would have seen everything the Nimitz saw. The Prowler. Basically anything that was tied into that data link, it would have seen in that Hawkeye.
And why do you think Underwood was recording while Fravor and the other plane were not recording?
Mainly because he had a heads up that something was out there.
Well, Fravor did too, I thought.
No, Fravor was already airborne, headed out to I think they were doing 232.
Well, okay, but then he's alerted, hey, we want you to go check something out. So you could turn the video on at that point, right?
He could have. I have no reason for him why he did or why he didn't. Mm-hmm. He could have been saving it for the actual training exercise he was a part of. He could have been more focused on what they were telling him to do. He would have to answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Michael was raising an interesting point, which is that these two guys that came and took it from me from the Air Force, you said they're wearing flight suits.
Yep.
So they're not hiding the fact in any way where they're from.
Nope. And the big thing is, and somebody asked me, how do I know they weren't, two Navy guys in flight suits that came with him? Because the insignia between a Navy flight suit and an Air Force flight suit are distinctively different. So you can tell the difference. You're taught in boot camp how to tell the difference between the services. Mm-hmm. So they were definitely Air Force uniforms, Air Force flight suit.
And you believe they arrived via helicopter?
When you're out to sea, there's only really two ways onto the aircraft carrier. One's by helicopter, one's by COD. The COD has the same engine, the same avionics as the Hawkeye. So when it comes out to the ship, the Hawkeye guys are the ones who take care of it. So I was with the Hawkeye or the COD every time it touched that day. And I saw no Air Force guys get off that COD. The helicopter comes and goes so often that you can easily miss somebody getting on and off of it. So my assumption is they came on via helicopter that day at some point.
And came from, and your assumption would be they came from where?
San Diego. Like I said, San Diego was only about a 45-minute flight time for an H-60.
Tell us about San Clemente Island and what happens there.
It's a training base. It's got a runway. It's got some tracking stuff for the Pacific Missile Test Range. I know if you screw up, they send you out to the island to.
It's your Alcatraz, basically.
Yep.
People don't like living on the island?
No, there's nothing to do out there.
And is that entire island of federal government?
Yes.
And as far as you know, is there super secret stuff taking place there?
Where San Clemente is, it's not far from Point Bagu Naval Air Station, which is the home of the Pacific Missile Test Range. That's where they do missile testing for basically any Navy missile that's been out there, whether it's air to air, air to ground, it gets tested out there. So they have a ton of different sensors that are right up there on the hill in Point Mugu. You can see them from the Pacific Coast Highway headed down to Santa Monica. San Clemente's got a bunch of them. There's ships that have a whole bunch of stuff for telemetry. There could be stuff out there, just nothing I'm outright aware of.
Mm-hmm. Are you aware of any technology that is secret I'm not asking you to disclose it, but you're aware of any technology that's secret that's anywhere close to explaining this Tic Tac?
No.
But you've probably done a lot of reading about it since. I mean, for instance, we've been talking on this show about these Navy patents that disclose something that appears to be very similar to the technology of a Tic Tac, even the size of it, explaining kind of anti-gravity technologies, etc. Is that anything you've looked into?
Briefly. I try not to clutter my mind with extra stuff.
Well, but I imagine it weighs on you, though, quite a bit, wondering what this thing was. I assume you'd really like to know the answer to that.
And that's the whole reason the whole group of us has gone public. Kevin Day and Gary Voorhees initially went public to support Dave Fravor. You know, the rest of us have joined in to support Dave Fravor and what Kevin said and what Gary said, and you know, we all support each other. You know, it's highly possible that, you know, the patents that the Navy has or some of the other systems that have come to light recently could have been back then much more secret than they are now. Could have been the things that were tested against us. You know, we could have been the test dummies for any number of the stuff that's people have asked about. But it was a physical object that was tracked. The data exists to prove that it was a physical object that was tracked, but obviously we don't have that data. The government's got it. We can't give it to you.
Mm-hmm. Two other questions. One is, from our last episode with T.D. Barnes, he talks about various phantom or altered reality technologies that exist out there that allow us to fool our enemies into thinking that they're encountering, you know, tons of our aircraft or whatever. I think one of the projects was called Nemesis and one's Pegasus.
Nemesis, yeah. I've heard of. Nemesis is one of them.
Yeah. So the idea that that's what this could have been was U.S. testing that type of technology.
The only issue I have with that is I just started reading into what's out there about that. So I don't know all the details for it. But again, we tracked a physical object. From what I understand about that stuff, it's not a physical object that they're going to try and track.
But it's supposed to lead the enemy into believing there's a physical object there.
Our radars, especially the Spy 1, as old as the Hawkeye's radar was at the time, and the advanced Hawkeye radars in use in 2015, there's very distinct attributes that those radars have that make it very difficult to spoof, to make it very difficult to jam, to spoof, to create false tracks, any of that. It's very hard to do that with technology. A lot of people say, you know, the Princeton was tracking seagulls, or the fact that the Princeton brought its radar down meant they were getting ghost tracks. You know, no, the Princeton brought its radar down to make sure, just to cover all its bases, that there's nothing wrong with it. When they brought the radar back up, they were seeing stuff even clearer than they were before. We were tracking it on radar. It was tracked passively through ESM systems, which is basically a giant set of headphones that listen to electronic signals. The objects were emitting electronic signals. You know, there's other stuff on that Hawkeye that was giving other data that I can't talk about. It's unlikely that it was a spoofing technology.
Not to mention the eyewitnesses.
Correct. You know, I understand the technology in Nemesis and what they're trying to do and how it would affect many radars in use today, but I don't think it would have been successful against the combination of technology that we had.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then last question is to tell us about this UAP expeditions that Kevin Day started up to track UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena.
So basically, they've got a bunch of experts in different fields that have all jumped on to support the project. Believe later this year, not sure the exact timeline off the top of my head. They've got 2 ships that they've chartered. One's going to hang out off San Clemente Island. The other's going to go around, and they're going out to the operating areas that we were in when they saw all this stuff to try and find them, to try and learn things, to try and get a whole bunch of new data to support everything we already know. Because there's been all kinds of reports, non-military wise, out in that area of the water off the coast of San Clemente, an island off of Mexico that they covered in unidentified. You know, there's a whole bunch of stuff in that area that kind of fits into everything we saw. So they're going.
You're talking about non-military reports?
Yep.
People seeing things similar to what you guys say you saw.
Yeah, not 100% identical, because most of them are, from what I understand, seen at much greater distances. But the group believes there's something in that area that is either contributing to all this or causing all this, and that's what they're going to find out.
And what's your role going to be in that?
Right now, I just take care of social media stuff.
Oh, okay.
I'm not the brains of the operation.
And are they planning a documentary on the mission?
I don't know. I know Dave Beatty's loosely involved. I know there's going to be recording equipment. I know there's going to be stuff out there. I just don't know what the exact plan with all of that is.
And what do you have to say about the participation of whales in all this? Because Kevin Day, in some of his pronouncements about this project, has talked about the tracking of whales and whale songs and UFOs associated with whales.
I'm not entirely familiar with that whole part of it. But like I said, I know they've got a marine biologist that's going to be a part of it. And they're trying to explore a whole bunch of different avenues for why that stuff is happening out there. Mm-hmm. And whales just apparently happens to be one of them.
That's not something you've done much looking into.
Nope.
Is Kevin someone who tends to lean toward it being more 60% extraterrestrial?
I believe he's probably further than that. And you'll have to talk to Kevin specifically about it, and I'll let him know you guys aren't scary, so maybe he'll come on.
Okay.
But he's had a whole bunch of different experiences since the Tic Tac events. And he believes deeply, and I have no reason to doubt him, that his experience with those objects has caused a lot of different things in his life.
So he's got quite a story to tell, and it's been so compelling that's caused him to start this new expedition.
Yep.
And hopefully we're going to have him on the show, and we really appreciate your help on that if we put in a good word for us. But just to give us one quick example of something that he says he experienced since.
I know he's had like dreams and stuff. He's got his outlook on life has changed since the events, on how he interprets stuff, how he sees stuff. He almost seems like he thinks he's connected to the object somehow. But again, he's in a much better position to explain all that than I am.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, cool. Well, PJ, I think that was extremely helpful to our investigation. I don't know how many episodes we've done at this point, 8 to 10 episodes. It all started with the Turber, but we've interviewed some very interesting folks, including Paco Chierici. Do you know Paco or of him?
Yep. I have some issues with him.
Yeah? What's that?
We were able to get in contact with him, and a group of us spoke with him, and he doesn't want to hear any of what we have to say. He basically regurgitates what Fravor has said and what the official report has said. And even when I personally quoted the report that he supports, that something happened, he basically told me I was wrong. So he's stuck in Fravor's back pocket, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the way he that was the mode he was in when he was on our show. And I'm kind of with you. I see the two stories very easily potentially coexisting, and you've kind of helped explain how it could be that Fravor didn't have things taken from him or wasn't interrogated or didn't have to sign NDAs, whereas the Hawkeye people did.
None of us discount any of Fravor's story. We believe everything he saw. We wouldn't be here if he hadn't gone public. It's the little part of his story where he says we're wrong that we disagree with.
Yeah, well, he landed on he would have landed on the Nimitz, obviously. But merely because he didn't encounter the two Air Force guys that you encountered, or didn't have things taken from him, or sign an NDA, I think you've given a pretty good explanation today as to why that could have been, while it's very possible that the people on the Hawkeye did have to sign the NDAs and you did have the bricks taken.
Yep. And I firmly, if somebody from the government with the right credentials showed up at my door tomorrow and told me I was not allowed to talk about any of this anymore, you'd never hear from me again. None of us are out to share any secrets. None of us are out to, badmouth the government. None of us are out for any of that. We're out to find out the truth about what we saw. Especially with Gary and I, we have to toe the line with some things we say because we know more than we can say.
But to be clear, going back to Roger and the other guys who are actually on the Hawkeye and personally observed it, you don't believe that they were told in any briefing what this was?
I'd like to think if Roger knew what it was, even if he couldn't tell me, he would have hinted that he did. And he's made no indications that he knows what it is any more than I do. So
they debriefed them. They weren't briefing them. They weren't given information. They were supplying what they knew. And since they had now firsthand sighting of this thing, which potentially was U.S. technology, here's the U.S. government saying, hey, what you saw, you're not allowed to talk about.
Exactly.
Thank you again to PJ Hughes for coming on the show and telling us his story. We will be back next week with another episode, and we'll have Kevin Day with us. He was on board the Princeton at the time of the incident, and he gives us information that he's never told before, including about how the captain of the Princeton seemed to be very disinterested in the whole Tic Tac UFO incident. A lot can be read into that. So tune in next week for Kevin Day as we continue our deep dive. Thank you all for listening, and thank you as always to our producer, Michael Parker.
Thank you for listening to The Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow. You can find us at hiddentruthshow.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show. Join us again next week for another episode of Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow.